For some reason, junglers like to label themselves. Farming jungler, ganking jungler, Karthus jungler, but you have to know how to gank and path for success regardless of said label. In this video, I will show you the best junglers to play in order to become a better jungler at ganking, no matter what class you enjoy playing. I will explain a ganking fundamental with each of the champions I have chosen so that you can take it right into a game after watching this video and immediately notice that difference in your ability to fist laners, and that's because I'm tired of seeing most ganks fail when they should succeed, and yes, that was a master level Malphite gank I saw in Alice's stream. All that and more coming up after this. The Mobalytics live companion app is here to help you climb. With the new highlights feature, you are able to review the positive and negative from your most recent ranked game to quickly review before you hop into the next one. Keep a backlog of all your great match history by setting the limit of the amount that it can store, so you can keep on identifying the most impactful plays that you have that influence your games. Additionally, once you get into the loading screen, you get to see the fellow teammates that will ride with you on this portion of your journey, while also allow you to import runes and builds for the statistical edge, only to be followed up by receiving useful, and that's the keyword, insights while you're playing, including ultimate spikes, item completions, and more. So in order to directly support the channel as well as to have the most complete way to learn, improve, and climb, download the Mobalytics companion app with the link below. Now look at this gank. What elo is it from, do you think? Imumu approaches from the river, burns a flash with the first Q, uses the second Q to perfectly follow up. Free kill. Platinum? Diamond? No, that's bronze. Just as often you'll watch ganks like what you're seeing on your screen now from a variety of elos because junglers are lazy. I'm sorry. It's why you like 2-minute spawn timers and AFK farming. And ganking is something that requires risk, and if you can remove that risk and have a high success rate, you are gonna get fat, you're still gonna get 7 CS a minute, don't worry, and the enemy jungler will be your bitch. So the first jungler we're going to talk about is Zac, and we have to because he stacks abilities with the amount of CC that he brings forth. So the next time you are ganking, think about Zac because I love him for learning how to gank because of the simple fact that you start out as a normal jungler with the slingshot range of a piece of string. But then with a few points in your E, you suddenly evolve to have the elasticity of the hair scrunchie that Taric uses. So while you have to walk into a lane with your typical angles from the river, from behind, from the front, it doesn't really matter, you are still looking to chain your CC together. If you miss it and burn their flash or their dash ability, you have your Q to slap their cheeks together with a minion, and no one likes it, trust me. And as your E gets leveled up, the range of your engage becomes even bigger and even bigger. This means you're now looking very deeply at the lane. You're no longer looking at yourself, especially those who play with a locked camera. You still have to learn to click and look at the lane while you're in because you want to make sure you hit that or get it as close as possible. You also simply learn about angles because you can gank from basically Grump to the top lane and hold that tower. You can take Herald and then basically almost leap from the Herald pit to the top lane. That isn't something that every jungler can do, but it definitely gets you thinking about ganking angles as well as stacking your abilities. And if you're playing something like a Sejuani, yeah, you don't have that same range, but your Q plus your E plus your W slow plus your ult, it's the same kind of CC stacking ability where you want to make sure you're not overcommitting your CC before they flashed and used their dash. Much like the Imumu example, so the Imumu was probably thinking of things like this. And obviously this is the foremost fundamental. Now on the note of ganking angles, but potentially even using this for push lanes, you now not only want to approach from 4-dimensional geometry, but you need to use your knowledge about stacking abilities to avoid basically both you and your top laner dying while you try and kill their top laner. And as you would have seen, obviously we're going to talk about Rek'Sai because her ultimate allows her to dodge tower aggro. Things like Elise allows her repel to dodge tower aggro. But also you don't have the same range of a Zac elastic slingshot at max rank with Rek'Sai, but you do have the ability with her tunnel to approach ganks from literally any angle you want. The lane's pushing doesn't matter to you, lane's pushed against you doesn't matter. You can conduct the same gank on the mid lane from 5 different angles and completely mess with their head, which is the whole point of ganking. You want to live rent-free in their minds and make sure they are going absolutely psychotic at their jungler's ineptitude, and at the same time making the enemy jungler feel like they have to chase you around because that's what you want to do as Rek'Sai and as most junglers. So next time you're ganking, and it doesn't matter what you're ganking with, think deeply about how a Rek'Sai or a Zac would approach this gank if you know there's vision. And that's the most important thing, you need to be able to avoid vision. And that's why when you play a couple of games of these champions and go back to say a more straightforward champion, you do think differently about how you're going to approach a gank from those angles. Additionally, with Rek'Sai that you might not always get with Zac and things like Kayn also bring to the table is flanking. If you want to go the long way around through the enemy jungler, walking manually around vision is kind of, it's a time waste, it's annoying, and sometimes you don't really know where things are warded. With Rek'Sai's tunnel cooldown being quite high, if you're simply trying to circumvent good vision, using it to get through a Raptor wall or a Herald wall is more than enough often to get a good angle of approach because remember, that's what we want here. That's what we're focusing on with Zac and Rek'Sai. Angle of approach such that they have nowhere to go. They can either run into you or they can run down. But either way, they're going to have to commit some kind of play to survive. And I just want to leech off of this point to talk about dives, but also being predictable. Things like a Nunu or Volibear, everyone knows what you're going to do, but you still have to make it work. Volibear obviously is the quintessential, hey, let's learn how to dive because your ult disables towers. So if you can basically go for the dive, learn how to dodge tower aggro and get out without using your ultimate, that's great, well done. But if you're in a bit of a bind, you can use your ult. So while that is great and all, the fact of the matter is when Volibear walks into a lane from the river, everyone knows what's going to happen. And this is where patience, vision understanding, and mind games come in. Yeah, you can work with tight angles and so on, but you're not going to have as much success as a Zac or a Rex or anything with map scaling. This then requires you to pay very close attention to lane states, vision placed by them, and so that you can move around them with strict pathing. And I've made videos on that, and I will link those in the description as well. But things like Nunu and Volibear, Xinqiao even, they're rewarded with good patience and good understanding of, stacking your CC abilities with your laners, waiting for laners to show up such that you can just make sure you've got a long lane to work with. You want the full lane when you play with these champions. Understanding matchups and simply pulling the trigger on these abilities while not overcommitting like with the Zac. Zac has backup, Sejuani has backup. Volibear, if you use a flash Q and they have their flash and dash up, you're not really going to be able to do much. And that's why repeat ganks come in with these champions, because if you do burn things on the first rotation, you can come again and, as I said in 2017, repeat and abuse. So now that you've looked for good angles, more angles than right trying to justify Zeri's design, you've got the good patience, it doesn't matter if you're being predictable, you're still finding success. The next thing that you learn is pulling the trigger, and Viego's one of those champions. Because Viego's E basically goes around all the terrain that he's using it, as soon as someone sees that, and they should, they know to back off. They know Viego's gonna show up with a W, with a flash W, and they will most likely die. As you would have seen in the intro, the Volibear was just sitting on a ward. Look at this. What are you waiting for here? You didn't scan your approach, you didn't hit a plant, you just sit in the bush, the lane's in a bad state, you're not using good ganking angles, you're not having a good angle of approach. You're just standing there like a pom-pom statue of a polar bear. And that's because you're not pulling the trigger. If you walk up to a pushing lane, even from this coaching, and again, not a high elo gank, you see there's wards, you scan it, it doesn't matter. Just move, pull the trigger. They've seen you, you know they've seen you, they're gonna run away, you don't have time to waste. When you have predictable pathing or a predictable kit, even with the Viego's case, even though you're kind of a question mark sometimes, it's still very, very important that you don't waste any moment once the laners have seen you approach. And that's the biggest thing you can learn about ganking, fighting, skirmishing, it doesn't really matter. Pulling the trigger when there's an opening and the enemy team mispositioned is the biggest difference by people making game-winning plays and game-losing plays. Because yes, it's a game-losing play if you make none. So the next time you walk up to a lane and you think it's warded and you're walking through that brush and you know you can have a good angle of approach, everything is primed, don't stop to clear the ward. Don't wait, just move. The worst thing about ganks in most elos is that people simply just waste time. And you would have seen again from the Malphite example, they try to save time by having a bad angle of approach, but the person can just run the other direction. You need to cut them off. So if it is warded and you know it's warded but they're pushed up, just stick close to the wall here. If I'll show you on a diagram, make sure you cut behind them and get into the gank. If you take too long of an angle of approach and you know it's warded, you're taking too long to get to them, which means they have more time to create distance, hug the wall, and escape. And just a note on angle of approaches, remember when it is warded they will see you, so you have to pull the trigger sooner. If it isn't warded, you can take a wider angle of approach when the lane isn't as well positioned, just to make sure you can try get a kill or even a flash. If it's more of a neutral state and they're basically trading, you can just go directly, basically as if it is warded. And if they are really pushed up, then you can of course directly commit. Not quite like the Malphite though, but basically I'm just showing you that there's a multitude of angles you can go depending on if it's warded, depending if it isn't, depending what champion you are, because you would have seen Rek'Sai's take different angles than the Viego. Hopefully you can see how all of these principles are now coming closer together, such that you can perfect your ganking technique after watching this video. And next up we have Rengar, and Rengar is the absolute king of lane ganks. And yes, Sion jungle mains, I know Sion can also lane gank, I get it. But Rengar is not just the ult down the mid lane with an Orianna ball like Season 4. Rengar isn't just ult down the bottom lane and double kill the bottom laners. It's also about understanding pushed lanes. Way too many times people tell me my lanes are winning, they're pushing, they're ungankable, and now the enemy jungler shows up and he kills them, and I'm upset because I was farming and I couldn't do anything about it. Well, that's just more bullshit than Russian propaganda, isn't it? It means you can track and counter gank, and if you want to become a great counter ganker, I suggest Echo, but you can use these same principles. Track the enemy jungler, and I will make a video about this for next week, by the way, and put yourself in the lane where they're going to be showing up. And scan your approach. Hopefully your bot lane is doing that as well, but make sure you're scanning using control, which position yourself. And as soon as they waste their spells on your bottom laners or whatever lane you're ganking, there's a Rengar on the bush, and now you get yourself a triple kill. So even if you don't have ultimate, if you're a Twitch, a Rengar, and you can do that, that's great, but you can also use the bushes as literally any champion when you're tracking and baiting laners to miss position so that you can feast on their bones. And if it's really pushed, then of course you can dive it as well, because you would have understood that by playing a few Rek'Sai games and maybe a volleyball game. Obviously, you can lane gank that, even if it's not optimal, because Tribush is just a better angle of approach. Now, there's two more things we need to talk about, and we're going to use Hecarim for the first one. Reactive pathing is the biggest difference between those who want to win and those who simply want to coin flip and exist. Hecarim will very much teach you how to farm quickly, and as soon as something happens on the map, you can rotate very, very quickly. Kayn again can do this as well, but Hecarim is really the poster boy for it, or poster horse. You see a 2v2 in the mid lane, doesn't matter if you're an iron level Kha'Zix, move, get there, you might be able to get a cleanup, you might be able to get an assist, you can get cleanup kills. Look at this Viego example from coaching. Doing the Krugs, a fight breaks out in the bottom lane. Instead of rotating immediately and leaving the Krugs, they will be there afterwards, I promise you. He finishes them, he thinks they're doomed, and then moves on up to the Raptors. Reactive pathing will win you games in low elo. It will literally help you climb, and you don't even need to worry about all the ganking fundamentals because you see something happen, you get yourself involved, and you avoid any sort of scenario where something might be possible for you, but you just didn't decide to sign up. And while most junglers cannot react like a Hecarim can, if you do use Predator, whatever you might be playing, you can, but it's still the principle of, hey, something's happening on the map, and I want to have a hand in impacting this so that I can get fed, because at the end of the day, you are the only person that you can rely on, and I mean, that's true for League and in life. No one's coming to save you in this particular arena. It's you have to take responsibility, you have to make the plays. And slapping the Grump on the face is great if everyone's already dead, but if you could get a triple kill, you could save your laners, you could push a wave, and then translate that to counter jungling, isn't that a better play? Finally, we have Fiddlesticks, and Fiddlesticks is crucial for learning how to gank because you focused on level 6 and because you really have to be aware of vision exploitation. Fiddlesticks is the quintessential champion for standing around like a scarecrow and waiting for things to happen. Waiting for that absolute sweet spot hippity-hoppity over the wall, your soul is now my property rockabelt activation technique. But if you're standing on a ward, that's not gonna happen.
I hate this channel.
No!
And what I love about Fiddlesticks is how unique the champion is, but how very much focused on positioning in these nooks and crannies around the map rewards those most dedicated to the soul-sucking life. And when you take that sort of obsession with vision, obsession for finding fog of war gaps, obsession with trying to find that perfect ultimate and making sure you can do frequently every game, you will realize that you can apply this to every single champion. And it does apply to every single champion, it's just exacerbated when you're Fiddlesticks. Each of these champions I've listed just really accentuate these fundamentals, but it's also very punishing when they don't do these things properly because they cease to be champions able to control games. So the next time you're an Evelynn, a Nocturne, a Shyvana, anything that's level 6 based that really wants to try get a good flank, a good ult off, especially AP Shyvana, ask yourself, what would Fiddlesticks do? So while ganking is high variance, while ganking has risk, if you have good fundamental execution on whatever champion you're playing, farming jungler, ganking jungler, you are basically forcing the enemy jungler who is farming and not paying attention to do something about it, to basically make equal and opposite plays. You are controlling the jungle tempo. And if you're well on your way to becoming a perfect ganker and obviously a perfect jungler, but you want to test yourself to see if your pathing knowledge and ability is really as good as you think, click on this video in the top right.